Welcome to the Filler Up Conference Call, the Alert Program and Holiday Challenges. I'm Shellenberger, and I'm joined today by my colleague and friend, MaryAnn Trott. Welcome, MaryAnn. I'll have MaryAnn give a shout-out so you'll know the sound of her voice.
Hi, guys. This is MaryAnn, and we're excited about I'm excited about the conference call today. MaryAnn may have trepidation as I have conned her into doing this, but
always fun.
Many of you have already had the pleasure of hearing MaryAnn speak, and I've had the incredible pleasure of working with her years ago, and there's no way I'm going to say how many years ago, but I'll tell you briefly about her background. MaryAnn is an education outreach manager with the autism programs here at the Center for Development and Disabilities at UNM, and she's a board-certified behavior analyst. She's taught special education classes in the public schools since 1974, and so don't do a lot of math in your head that way right now. She serves as both a has served as both a special ed classroom teacher and a consultant. She's worked with the Albuquerque public schools for more than 30 years and has traveled throughout the United States giving lots of seminars. So that's where some of you may have had the pleasure of hearing her. And if you haven't had that pleasure already, I would certainly encourage you to do so. She's also the author of two wonderful books, Sensibilities, Understanding Sensory Integration, and another one called Oh Behave, about sensory processing and behavior strategies. And she and her husband Wayne are the proud parents of two grown children. And I love the title too, MaryAnn, on the Oh Behave, because I feel like that as many of us on the call have had that moment where we know it's not professional or not parent-like, but there is that moment where you want to go, oh, just behave, don't make
all
me.
you want.
Yeah. Right, that's right. That's our outcome, our desired outcome. So because we're going to talk about the alert program and holiday challenges, I set up a little soundbite that we'll try to cue up here to get us in the mood and set the tone for our talk today. So my tech folks are going to cue that up for me. All right, so Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and definitely getting close to a Happy New Year here. I like to tell you all, you can rest assured I won't be releasing a holiday album, obviously, so, but I appreciate you humoring me. I always like to have a little tiny sound bite in here. I think it just kind of keeps it fun. So our goals, because it's only 30 minutes long and because the time kind of whizzes by on us, we have our two general themes that we try to keep in all of the calls. The first is keeping it simple, where we don't want folks to get overwhelmed or try to do too much at once, and that can tend to make it impossible to follow through. And as we have MaryAnn here to help us understand how the importance of and some easy ways to help it follow through, that's a biggie. So this is your permission and validation to go at things gradually and prevent that overwhelm. And then the second theme, of course, is to set people up for success. That's our clients, our families, and ourselves, actually. And it's a huge emphasis that MaryAnn, and I have had all throughout the work with the Alert Program over the decades, if you will. So remember, just a reminder to those of you on the call today, I know we have a lot of people with lots of different backgrounds, and I'm excited about that. You'll get an email document after the call that has all the links or references that we use, websites, blogs, books, songs, that kind of thing, or that we mentioned during the call. So don't feel like you're scrambling to try to write things down as we talk. And I'm going to do a little bit of a different format here today. I'll include some of the links of things that are tied to the winter holidays like Hanukkah and Christmas in your resource list. But I really wanted to spend a lot of time talking and learning from MaryAnn so that she can share with us kind of just general behavior helpful tips, really, that we can use as we think about our clients having heightened challenges during lots of the holiday kind of times, faced with the hustle and bustle, if you will. And as I was planning for this call, I was thinking about holidays in general, and really so much of what we're going to talk about today applies to all of life, but even things like a birthday party or whatever could certainly kind of fall into this category of the things that I've asked MaryAnn to help me with today. So keep that in mind as you go through. There are lots and lots of web places that you'll see in the resource list that go into a lot of different sensory strategies. And in my mind, I hope we'll get to some of those today, but the bigger thing I wanted to get to is and what I feel like is so important that MaryAnn can help us with is the how do you use strategies, when do you use them, why do you use them, and that's what really affects our success in supporting the behavior of others. So I'm excited to have MaryAnn here, and one of the colleagues that MaryAnn and I both got to work with is Patty Otter, who's an occupational therapist, and those of you that don't know her, she's an author, a lecturer, and you can certainly look up lots of her work, or if you have a chance to see her, take advantage of that in person. But one of the things that she helped me to understand, and I think it'll be good for us to think about as we go through the call, is that diagnostically, a lot of our different folks with different challenges need different things, especially when we think about the timing of behavioral support, the timing of sensory supports. Those of our kiddos or clients that may be on more of the attention deficit spectrum need lots of novelty. They need things to be changed up to keep it interesting to them, and that's really helpful to them. And then there are those folks for maybe more on the autism spectrum, some of our children with obsessive compulsive disorder challenges, anxiety kinds of disorders. They may be much more comfortable having a routine and a predictability and a sameness. So then our preparation and support for them will be important, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about today, is kind of the preparation and how we can plug things in to help to support our individuals. So think about that as you go along, and we'll kind of dive in on the holiday preparation. Planning, I know we can't probably say this often enough, it's really the key, because even when we plan as much as we humanly possibly can, we'll still experience times where we have unexpected events or just that moment. I like to say my brain goes, wow, I didn't see that one coming, kind of thing. So when our nervous systems, our own individual nervous systems, are set up in a good place, and we're in a good place, the unexpected doesn't need to feel as disorganizing, oh wow, easy for me to say, as disorganizing or as scary. And that's backed up a lot by many just general articles on the effects of research and stress chemistry in our bodies. So those of you that are going to be the adults or the caregivers to your people that you're listening to for on the call here for, make sure that you take care of yourself. That's going to be really important. Now, this one came to mind to me just in terms of preparation tips, is that plan your calendar and limit your activities as to what you and your family really like or enjoy in this kind of a busy time. There's a fun little parent blog where they talk about, it's called the Parent Society. It'll be in your list. The woman says, I love this. It's okay to skip Santa. It's okay to miss Christmas. It's okay to celebrate Hanukkah at home rather than go to temple. Whatever it is that's going to make this season, the busy season, enjoyable for you, those are obviously the things that you want to prioritize. Now, that's easier said than done, because I was looking at my own holiday calendar here as I got to plug in all the events from my family, and I was like, wow, this is kind of a lot. And so all of us face those challenges, but really make sure to look at doing that and taking care of yourselves, as well as looking at what might be the most wonderful events or most interesting events for the people that you're thinking about as you're on the call that you want to support. So while we will talk about some sensory strategies, but generally I'll ask MaryAnn to set us up for success by understanding and explaining a couple of the behavioral concepts that I think are just so very important, that I've learned so much from MaryAnn about, especially when we're around family members or other people that may not have as much experience being around the person that you're thinking about here, your client or your family member. And we may need just some simple ways to explain to others that helps them to understand. There's so many myths out there. There's so many preconceived notions about what's good behavior, what's good management, that kind of thing. So MaryAnn, talk to us just a little bit about the idea of when we have extra challenges for our person in these kind of holiday times or extra stressful events, how we might want to look at adjusting the behavioral demands in those situations there.
So sometimes when things are pretty chaotic, it's best to kind of back off maybe on some of the
yes.
some of the things that you're really working so hard on. So, for example, if you're working on possibly helping your child do chores, and those are maybe not that child's favorite things to do, and you have guests in your home, or you're in someone else's home, then maybe that's the time to really support your child in doing those things. So not back off completely on having them, take their dishes to the sink or empty the trash or, help make the beds, but give them the support that they might need in terms of your presence and your help in getting those tasks accomplished a little more quickly so that you can all move on to other things and, possibly making a game of it and providing support in that way that you can have fun together in doing those things. And so that in terms of the routines that you're not completely abandoning them, but you're just making them a little more easy to follow.
And, I loved that idea, MaryAnn, because it's always this dicey thing, I think, for folks in parenting or in supporting clients is we still want to help them and have things that we expect them to do, but looking at how we're going to either provide extra support or back off slightly doesn't mean we have to give up on all the things that the wonderful things that they're already able to do and that they already know. I was thinking about this when you and I talked, and a simple example that I can come up with there too is that I know of a child who he's pretty much potty trained, but the parents choose that when they're in situations where he may be doing a sleepover at the relatives or at someone else's house, that they just go ahead and have him wear a pull-up instead of counting on that the potty training is going to maintain and kick in and be fine. And I think that's just one of those really, just simple ideas like that. And it's not going to set him back. He's still motivated to be potty trained. He likes that. We're not going to undermine the whole thing we've worked on here. But it just makes it simple, and people aren't stressed and worried about changing sheets and him worried about being embarrassed and all those kinds of things. So
Aunt Susie will be much happier if her bed stays dry.
This is right, and it's just easier for everybody. So that's a great one.
And bedtime routines would be another issue there, so that you would be thinking about, possibly if you're in someone else's home or you have company, you're not going to completely abandon the bedtime routine, but it might take place, a half an hour or even an hour later, and you might have to streamline that bedtime routine, but maintain it so that, the child still gets the idea of these are the things that I do before I go to bed, and the kind of the comforting things and habits that we have that provide both sensory support and behavioral support for kids as they need to get to sleep.
Perfect, because that's just that delicate balance, and we need to give ourselves a break and look at what supports the child and what's going to help us all to maintain well during the holidays. And then as we look at when we have these challenging times where there's a lot more demands, that we ourselves and a lot of the people we're thinking about here might need a few more breaks or some getaway kind of times. And talk with us a little bit about your thoughts on some of that.
Well, it's really important for all of us to, kind of move away from things when we need to do that. And as adults or,
yes.
As more competent people, we have a way of doing that. We can, take ourselves off to the bathroom, or we can, go to the kitchen for a drink of water. We can take short breaks. Helping our children do that, though, because they don't always have that recognition that I just need to get away from people for a minute. It's important for us as the people who care about them to kind of keep tabs. Are they doing okay? Do they need a little break? Should I, as a parent, take them for a little walk around the block, or take them for a little story, a little cuddle time alone, take them to the kitchen for a snack or a drink of water, and it really that's okay for them to do. It's also okay for them to, if they're old enough and can supervise themselves, to give them permission to excuse themselves and go to another room for a short period of time. And it's really not intended as a punishment that they're not behaving appropriately, and they need to understand that, as do any other people, that it's just a way that they need to take a little time to themselves to kind of regroup and be able to maintain that good behavior. And again, in terms of planning for success, you want to do that before the behavior begins to melt down and not wait until it's going to be a big, ugly deal. And you also need to be confident in what you know about your child. So if you know that about 10 minutes is all he's going to be able to take of listening to Uncle Harry or playing ping pong with him, then you need to, step in about, 10 minutes in and say, this has been great and how much fun we've had, and, let's take a break now. So be confident in your own knowledge of your child, and don't let people convince you otherwise, because everybody will be happier. If mama ain't happy and the kid ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
It does have a snowballing effect, doesn't it? Indeed. Not only in our emotions, but also in our just general co-regulation, right? There's so much wonderful work on that, and many of you are familiar with the work on co-regulation. But I love that explanation, MaryAnn, because it's just I think sometimes we're so worried about what others might be thinking, or, oh, how will it look? But if we give the words to it, if we explain to people, nobody, and especially to the individuals involved, this isn't about being bad. This is about everybody needs breaks. Sometimes you don't always get to see when you need one. I'm looking at you. I see you need one. Let's go do that. And giving people that are new to our people ways to understand and learn more. One of the things that I know a lot of parents have shared, and you've talked to many parents about this before, is that a parent might say something like, "Oh, I try to give him timeouts when he's bad, but it doesn't seem to work for him," or whatever.
Well, and timeout is only going to work as a punishment if the child is engaged in something that they really are enjoying.
This was huge. I know it seems like a duh when you say this, MaryAnn, but it's huge, right?
So, if the child is doing something that you don't want them to do, and you send them off to their room where they get to play with the video game or, the toys that they like, it is really no punishment at all. And actually might serve the purpose for them of taking that much-needed break. And so the next time they need a break, you may begin to see some misbehavior, not because the child is, really misbehaving, but because the child needs a break, and the last time they did this is how they got it.
It wound up being a good benefit to them versus a punishment. And so I love that and I think it's so important that, and I know you talk a lot about this and write a lot about this, but it's so important to be clear about what the break is about, when it's punishment or when it's just really that we all need some downtime.
Right, and it's only a punishment. A punishment is only a punishment if it actually changes behavior. If it doesn't change the behavior, then you decide whether it's, being mean or, something that you just want to do anyway.
And that's huge. And so those of you that are experimenting or trying things, we really want to keep that in mind, that in true behavior training, if we're not seeing results, then we're on the wrong thing, huh? Mm-hmm. When I was also thinking about the holiday times and challenges that we have, sometimes folks that aren't used to being around our people, whether it's your client or your loved one, they don't maybe understand the communication signals the same way that we do, those of us that spend a lot of time around the folks. And that one of the tips that you talked about in the Oh Behave book, and I know you speak on a whole lot, is kind of those miscues that we read from our individuals. So especially for lots of our folks that aren't using words yet. So we have situations where, like, if a child, we as the adults see the child and they seem to be misbehaving, whatever that is in that moment, but they're smiling, that can get really confusing.
Well, and smiling or laughing may indicate that you're having a wonderful time, but it also may indicate that your nervous system is overwhelmed. And sometimes I think we've all probably had the experience of, an almost uncontrollable urge to laugh in completely inappropriate situations, like a funeral when everyone is sad and overwhelmed, or when something, really tragic has happened. And so it really is important to look at the behavior and see if indeed, there is some component that the child does really seem to be enjoying, or if it's a matter that the child's nervous system is just overwhelmed and the child needs an area to calm down, take a few deep breaths, pull themselves together, and certainly they need to understand what it is they can and cannot do in terms of their behavior. But while you're taking responsibility for this person, you kind of need to evaluate. Mary Sue and Sherry talk so much about being a detective. You are a behavioral detective as well, and evaluating what that behavior is really, what that behavior really means.
And when we have that clenched and stressed expression, we all know that and have seen that difference between a smile of joy and that smile of, like, I am barely hanging on here. And so really, again, trusting ourselves and our information that way. Also, for those of you that have students or family members that are able to use their words a lot and talk and converse with people, they may get really excited and extra passionate for a very extended period of time on those topics. So I was thinking about it that we have it as a little bit of a standing joke in my family, and I know my brother would be okay with this if I share it, is that if you're invited to dinner in our big family grouping, basically you get a warning that if you choose to bring up the topics of Elvis or the Titanic, which are two of my brother's very passionate interests that he can talk about for a very long time, then you're on your own in terms of getting out of that conversation. But so you may want to have ways that and I was teasing about it in that way, which is a little more of a negative approach. And MaryAnn, you had such nice information for us about, on a more proactive note, how to kind of help people in those situations and anticipate some of that.
Well, certainly providing warnings for the adults that are, likely to come and may bring up these things is an important thing. And indeed, if they do, and when they're forewarned and they end up in these situations, then it really is kind of their issue, not yours. But on the other hand, it's important for your child, your student, to understand that people don't always want to listen forever and ever about, sprinkler heads or whatever. And so some ways to think about helping them to stop that conversation are to give them fair warning that, okay, I'm going to talk with you about 3 minutes more about this, and then I'm going to go do this. Or even better, let's talk about this for 3 more minutes, and then let's go find a game to play, or let's go take a walk, or let's go find Aunt Susie and see what she's up to, so that there's something definite for that person to do. And it's also, if you can, for more mature students or individuals, if you can help the unfamiliar family members think about things that they might ask about,
right?
That things that the student enjoys, but that may not provoke that extended conversation, like yoga exercises. Can you show me how you do that? What's the favorite book that you've been reading, and who are the favorite characters? So that you really put parameters around the conversation and not really give the person an opportunity to ramble off on topics of special interest.
Right, and that is true. Is that helping people to understand, helping them to know more about the individual, so they do have ways and topics that they can communicate on and connect about. Also, I think just when I was thinking about holidays, there's lots of things, and Marcy Laurel helped us, if those of you that were there on the Halloween Tips recording or are interested in hearing that in the future, talked about how confusing some of the holiday concepts are cognitively, that Santa Claus is kind of a confusing concept. And I loved one of the parent blogs that we'll put in your resource list. The parent had such a great line. She said, "My child looks at me as if to say, why is this wrapping paper, why on earth would you put this wrapping paper over this thing to block my toy, and then I have to wade through it to get to the actual toy?" And I thought that was such a beautiful statement. It really is true. A lot of the stuff we think and are comfortable with in our holiday routines and rituals are part of our culture. We feel comfortable with them. They feel classic to us. They can be really confusing when our folks cognitively or traditionally, culturally don't understand what's going on. So just kind of keeping some of that in mind. I'm going to ask you another one, MaryAnn. And it kind of fits our whole thing about how we've talked about timeouts, getaway times, and things. Is that in your O Behave book you talk about if escape is a motivation for a behavior, it may be secondary to a sensory issue. And I think this comes up a lot in our holiday kinds of seasons, because there's so much going on sensory-wise.
Yes, there are, situations where, there are, 15 additional people at the dinner table or, a lot of noise and excitement going around as people, open gifts or whatever. You may see misbehavior, but again, that misbehavior may be motivated by a need to get out of the situation, take a break, have a quieter place. And so, again, those are situations in which you really need to protect your child and predict for your child or your student what it is that they need. So, for example, a family dinner, it may be okay for a young child to, eat the amount of food that you think that they might want to eat and then be excused from the dinner table. It really is, there is no virtue in, holding on with clenched teeth and making a child sit for, an hour and a half dinner when they really finished eating about an hour ago. So that would be a situation, and certainly the situation with opening presents, it's not going to be any fun for anybody if, somebody has a big meltdown. So looking at, how much of that kind of input that you think your child can take, and again, trying to predict to your best ability how you can intervene and allow that child something, an escape route before the meltdown happens.
And this is so huge. I remember one of our friends was saying that they were talking to a parent the one time, and the parent was like, "Are you saying we could actually try to prevent the meltdowns instead of just we'll have the meltdown and then we have to deal with it?" And that is exactly what we are saying, and MaryAnn is fantastic at helping us to understand that.
Well, and preventing is so much more fun.
Oh my gosh, yes. Nobody benefits from the big dramatic ordeal, do they?
Right, and you can actually, enjoy the time with your child.
There is a concept
that you're taking a break together, or that you're doing a little chore together, or something, quiet between parent and child that can actually be enjoyable in addition to preventing the big old meltdown.
And one thing I have to ask you about, because we talked about it in our little advertisements, was one thing that I loved, MaryAnn, which we talked about, which is the soggy potato chip rule. And tell us a little bit, a minute or two about that.
So when your child is behaving in ways that you would prefer for them not to behave, one of our tendencies, or those of your family members, is to really talk to them about how they're misbehaving, and possibly take them to the other room and give them a really good talking to. And really the fact is that if particularly if you have been noticing that your child is not getting as much attention as they usually do, or that other people are getting attention, it could be that the misbehavior is related to a desire for attention. And really, attention is attention, and it doesn't matter positive or negative. If what you want is attention, then you can get it any way you choose. It's the same idea as a potato chip. If you really, really have to have a potato chip, you'll take the one that's been in the back of the cabinet for 3 weeks as readily as you'll take one that's nice and fresh.
So stale, if the desire is there, stale or not, you'll go for it, kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Perfect. Well, we're getting close to our closing time. I want to take one or two parent questions that we have here. I know I could talk to MaryAnn for days, and yet she actually has a life and will not tolerate this from me. So we'll try 2 parent questions here, or at least get one in before we end up here. And MaryAnn, this is a question I think parents and those of you as therapists who have tried to answer this question, how do I make him or her behave?
Well, the fact is, everybody pretty much knows you can't make anybody do anything.
Darn.
But, sort of counterintuitively, for some people, the answer is that you make yourself the source of all good things. That you make yourself, everything good comes through you. Is it snacks? Is it things to do? Is it, pats and hugs and, rides on the bike, whatever, that all good things come through you. And so when you pair yourself with the good things that happen in life, then your child is going to be much more likely to respond to you, to come to you when you ask him to do the things that you ask them to, because they know that interaction with you is going to result in good things and not bad things. So if, in other words, if I do come when she tells me to come, then it's just as likely to be a good thing as a bad thing, rather than knowing that if she tells me to come, she's going to give me a whack on my bottom, or she's going to make me do something I don't want to do. Of course they're going to avoid you. So making a child behave is making yourself so pleasurable and so much fun for that child that they will respond to you in almost all circumstances.
That is such a great way. What a better way to show them that we really are their loved ones than to do that. Now, another quick parent question I'll fit in here, and then we'll wrap it up, is a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, we talked about a lot of pieces. If I take your advice on these things, what can I expect?
Well, if you take my advice, or really the advice of any behaviorist, you might be expecting that whatever specific behavior you're focusing on might get worse rather than better.
Oh, this is so important for folks to know going in, huh?
But it also is important to know that it's probably a good thing. So
Right.
it's like if you go to the grocery store and your child begs for candy and you say no, your child might become upset and cry about it. But if you stand firm, the next time the child is probably less likely to beg for candy for quite as long.
And so there's our dangling carrot for ourselves at the end of the moment, is that if we stay with it, if we look at what we're doing and go at it systematically, we have a much better chance of having success and having everybody feel more comfortable in the world. So, I think we did a good job in our time of keeping it simple. We talked about some really nice holiday season things that might help us to be able to enjoy our loved ones more. And we definitely talked about a lot of the pieces that will set us up to be able to have as much success as we possibly can in these times and enjoy each other. So I know many of you will look forward to your your list of links that will kind of support some of this great information, remembering that heavy work strategies from the ALERT program, in, mouth, move, touch, look, or listen, will be ones that will definitely add to the sensory support as we've talked about a lot of the behavioral pieces. So for many of you, this should validate a lot of the things that you're already doing. Keep up the good work. I want to thank you again, MaryAnn, so much for joining me today. I always learn more. That's a great feeling for me. I sure appreciate it. And then our common sense disclaimer, if this call is intended to give you suggestions and supports for people that you live and work with who have some challenges, and that if you heard something in the call and you think that does not make any sense to me, or I don't think that's a match for my child, then trust your judgment. Don't do it until you get extra help and extra support. You certainly deserve that. This is our time to say goodbye, and happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays. Thanks for the time to talk with you.